How's it going, everyone? It's Vivi and welcome back. So, as a reminder, Kingdom Hearts Union Cross's story is yet to reach its conclusion this coming April. What we're going to explore today is not the finale, but we are getting closer and closer. There is no specific date about the actual finale of Union Cross's story. All we know is that the story ends sometime this April. On May 30th, the app will be going offline, meaning that the whole story of Union Cross will be compiled in theater mode, and that's what will pretty much remain of Union Cross. As for other details about this end of service, a link will be put in the description below. Fun fact, the global version of Union Cross is now up to date with Japan's. With that said, let's get on with today's topic. So let's start with this cutscene. Our Union leaders try to deal with darkness. It doesn't seem to be like an easy task, just looking at what's going on, everyone passed out on the ground. Brain feels darkness showed up for a reason. Was it out of fear or out of pride? Darkness then says infection. That for data to transfer you need a signal. Darkness says that darkness easily rides on those signals. Now riding on those signals, darkness took over Ven eventually, which led to the death of Strelitzia, Laurium's sister. Darkness explains that taking over Ventus was decided. Kinda makes it seem like he's following a script, like he's read the Book of Prophecies. Yeah, basically Darkness is willing to be bound to a script. After Skald regains consciousness, there's one interesting line Darkness mutters: "We are many, and we are one." We'll keep that phrase in mind for later use, alright? It might have relevancy. So now, Darkness explains that he took over Ven, believing that being one with Ventus creates this essence of pure darkness and pure light. Doesn't it remind you of Xehanort's failed attempt at forging the Keyblade with one pure light and one pure darkness? I mean, it does remind me of that. Now, we're not sure how much Marluxia remembers of his past in this scene, but he does remember his past, confirmed Nomura a while back. What I'm saying here, does Marluxia, or Laurium, his real name, remember not blaming Ven for the death of his sister? I'm just curious because I wonder what it's gonna be like once Marluxia sees Ven in the present timeline. As for other things going on here, the player shows up. That was quite unexpected. Now Laurium is confident in stopping darkness and returning to the real world. Yes, for quite a while now, these 5 Union leaders have been aware of being in a data version of Daybreak Town. What they don't know was this part of the Master's plan. Now Darkness questions Laurium, asking if he's referring to the Lifeboat. Yep, he is. The same exact Ark, or Lifeboat in this case, which is the official North American translation, which Maleficent used. Maybe a little sense of confusion going on here. Is Darkness referring to the data version of Daybreak Town, or the real one? Like when they leave the data world, does the word "this" world mean data or the real Daybreak Town? I personally interpreted Darkness's wordings having to do with the real Daybreak Town. If you return, aka exit the data world, real Daybreak Town will still succumb to the darkness regardless. And then Ephemer freaks out asking Darkness what he's done to the real world. Again, it was decided long ago. It just goes to show how he's following the script. I'm talking about Darkness. Now when a lifeboat is activated, this world, aka real Daybreak Town, succumbs to darkness. It's already in motion, the beginning of the end, explains Darkness. Lifeboat, Darkness believes it's last resort. Sensing that these guys will fear these beings, Darkness, they'll eventually just use a lifeboat out of fear. And what's going to happen to the world? It's going to be left to the darkness, because these guys will pretty much take over. The evil fairy's departure was the trigger, explains Darkness. They can't stop it. Now the thing with Maleficent, when using a lifeboat in the data world, the first thing that happens, you enter the real Daybreak Town. Well, in other words, you travel to the real Daybreak Town first, and then you have to reuse the lifeboat again within the real Daybreak Town. Although we have 2 Daybreak Towns, one being real and the other data, Darkness taking over, as I mentioned previously, I mean, it has to do with the real world. Whatever's going to happen to the real Daybreak Town, we're aware it's going to become Scala at some point. Our leaders don't think they were pawns or set up. they don't believe Ava would use them like this. One question that comes to mind, which I don't really have an answer to, we should be aware that our Union leaders came here with other Dandelions, right? I mean, they're Union leaders for a reason. So how will the other Dandelions escape the data world? If we are to believe what Maleficent did, you know, enter a lifeboat, travel to the real Daybreak Town first, and do it again? I mean, there's only 7 lifeboats in both the data and real Daybreak Town. We'll discuss more about these lifeboats later in the video. All I can believe right now is that Dandelions that remain behind eventually will give birth to Scala, transforming Daybreak Town into Scala at Kylum. The ones that remained behind will help shape the world for the next generation. Now before we proceed to what happens after this fight, let's take a look at other scenes first. We have some scenes that play before the Union leaders fight darkness, starting with this one. Luxu stares at the clock tower from a distance, believing that the Dandelion's time is almost up. What this scene implies pretty much, the Dandelions or our 5 Union leaders will soon use a lifeboat to escape. Escape where? Into the future. Or we'll try to. Again, we'll discuss more about the lifeboats later in the video. Now there's another scene, this one, that plays right after this one. An extended look at the case of Luxu from back cover. This is a flashback, as you can see from the blurry black edges. So as usual, we have no clue what's inside the box. The Master of Masters whispered in his ear, but we have no idea what he told him. He could have yet again be messing with Luxu, whispering in his ear, haha, I won't tell you. Judging from his reaction here, Luxu isn't quite sure what the box is for. The Master gives him a hint. When the lifeboat departs after darkness hits dawn, this world will have fulfilled its purpose. This right here reinforces the actual world darkness was referring to before, the real Daybreak Town. Once that happens, the world serving its purpose, the Master wants Luxu to be there until the end and then quickly exit the world. There's no way to beat the darkness. So that right there, you wonder, just who is the Master of Masters? What is his goal? Is he on the side of light, darkness, none? Before I say anything else, I feel like Luxu will not be using a lifeboat. Why? Because Luxu used vessels as a means to travel to the future, albeit slowly, until we reach Kingdom Hearts 3's epilogue. So looking at the remainder of this scene, the Master made sure the Dandelions would pass the torch to the next generation. Pretty much what I think personally, the data world I'd like to believe was a way to safeguard our Dandelions, until they have the strength to pass down their Keyblade to the next generation. Once Daybreak Town falls, it'll turn into Scala thanks to the Dandelions being seeds of light, which can be sown into the future. That future being Scala at Kylum. Alright, so let's go back to what happens in this scene. We're back to the Union leaders dealing with darkness. Darkness says we're formless. You can't defeat us. It summons a bunch of Darklings. Darklings saying you. This whole time they've been looking for Ventus, I take it. Ven wakes up, light appears, and they all vanish. And this is where we can start making connections to Vanitas, the whole theme of pure light and pure darkness. Ven believes he can reshape darkness after what he did to him. Ven proceeds by wanting to give him a new form, a form which he can fight. Lauriam doesn't want to lose Ven. So this no longer is a scenario of Marluxia remembering his past and going after Ventus to avenge his sister. He already forgave him in the past. And boom! Ventus tries fighting the darkness, and the scene ends just like that. Before we move on to the next, Ven being a pure light, I'd say, is what allowed Old Man Xehanort to create Vanitas. If you remember in Birth by Sleep, Xehanort extracted darkness out of Ven. It took a human form, which I'd say is a result of what Ven did in this scene right here. Also, going back to the scenes from Remind, Vanitas explains that he's been hiding inside Ven. This whole time, Vanitas, at least taking the form of a human, was due to Ven reshaping darkness in the past. Although he looked like a human, he didn't really have a face at first. So Vanitas looking like Sora, well, that was due to Sora's heart touching Ven's when his heart fractured, due to the extraction of what came to be Vanitas. Xehanort believed it was pulling away the light inside Ven's heart, but then it touched Sora's and Ven slowly came out of his coma state. Although Darkness was not technically Vanitas per se, it did become Vanitas eventually. Next, we have a scene with Darkness inside the room where all the lifeboats are found. Based on what Darkness says here, now to check on the data, this is outside of the data version of Daybreak Town. Luxu enters the room. Darkness wonders, who the heck are you? This is not what was written in the book. At this point, we believe Darkness read the book. Now going back to this scene with Maleficent, well, we are to believe that Darkness read the book. So going back, Darkness is confused. Luxu was supposed to just watch and observe, but now Luxu realizes what the Master really meant. With no Keyblade wielders supposed to be here, Darkness then believes, oh, you must be Luxu. And what do we have here? Darkness and Master are friends, which we'll look at in another scene, or flashback. It'll confirm more of this, that Darkness and Master know each other. I'm already seeing some Braig Xigbar in this guy. Well, technically Braig comes in the timeline late in the future, but you know, just the way he speaks here. Yeah, he chose Braig as his last vessel, but I'm just saying, like, I'm seeing some Braig here. So what happens next? Whoever Luxu is holding in that white blanket or cloth, he plans to send this individual into the future, what he calls a seed of light, and the true Dandelion. So I'm gonna lay, right on the table for you guys, two individuals that come to mind. The person wrapped in that white blanket is either Ven or Ava. Ava and Ven for me personally fall within the category of true Dandelion. Think about it. Ventus is a pure light, aka Light of Hope, Seed of Light, whatever you want to call him. And then we have the driving force of the Dandelions, the founder of the Dandelions, Ava. However, one question might make you rethink about Ventus, and this question is as follows. Does this scene happen after the Union leaders dealt with Darkness? At the same time, if this takes place after. Let's start with that. This can be Ventus, why not? Ven trying to reshape Darkness caused him to get completely knocked out, and then gets abducted by Luxu, who he planned to send to the future as a seed of light. Once you plant a seed, it grows, it thrives. Like the situation with Xehanort and Vanitas. Ven was used to create Vanitas. Ven's already acting like a quote-unquote seed to create Vanitas. Ven's purpose was to forge the Keyblade, one of pure light and one of pure darkness. Ventus merging with Vanitas. But it failed. Xehanort's failed attempt at forging the Keyblade is what pushed him to try harder. Ven was the seed of all the events that happened in the series. Without a pure light like Ventus being discovered by Xehanort, then the events would have turned out differently. Ven played a pivotal role in Xehanort's plans. Everything that's happened in the series ties back to Xehanort. So before I proceed, I'd like to clarify something. Just because Ven, if that is him, just because he's in the same looking white blanket we saw in Birth by Sleep on Destiny Islands, doesn't mean Xehanort found Ven like this on Destiny Islands. Remember, according to Xehanort's report, number 10 in Birth by Sleep, Ven on Destiny Islands happened after Vanitas was born. So what possibly could have happened? Xehanort finds Ven in this blanket, sure, but he didn't find him like that on Destiny Islands. It just so happens Xehanort found good use of the blanket afterwards, perhaps having special properties, one that protects them from the darkness. After all, we have the same blanket on a replica in this scene with Demyx in Kingdom Hearts 3. Is it the same blanket? Is it one that was built off the original? I mean, who knows? But there was one that looked exactly the same. What this cloth does, it shields people or objects from the darkness. Now, of course, if this scene is happening at the same time as them fighting darkness or before, then this can't be Ven. Remember that phrase I told you to keep in mind at the beginning of the video? We are many, and we are one. Basically, darkness can coexist in data and in real Daybreak Town at the same time. So yeah, if this scene either happens before or at the same time, then I imagine Ava, for one simple reason only. Remember when they fought before the Keyblade War? Yeah, what exactly happened to Ava afterwards? I'm not saying Luxu beat Ava and brought her here immediately afterwards. The timeline wouldn't exactly make sense. Ava was present during the Keyblade War. What happened? Well, I'm guessing one way or another, Luxu chose Ava. He takes her unconscious body and sends her flying to the future. planting a true dandelion in a seed of light. Cue the whole Kairi grandma being Ava. If Ava wound up in a timeline where it gave her enough time to turn into a grandma, I mean, it's Kingdom Hearts, anything can happen. What I'm saying here, if we look at the epilogue in Kingdom Hearts 3, Breg, or Luxu in this case, explains that Ava couldn't make it. Like, he remembers sending Ava, if that was her in the white blanket, but she just didn't make it. Like, she wound up somewhere else, fulfilled her purpose. Her purpose perhaps being the true dandelion, or the seed of light he was talking about. So, next question. Who will use the remaining lifeboats? When Maleficent, well, prior to her getting inside a lifeboat, we had a total of 7 in the data world. What happened? She used 1, traveled to the real Daybreak Town, used it again to finally travel to her timeline. That's -1 lifeboat. We are left with 6. So if we count the mystery character in the white blanket, we have 5 slots left. Right off the bat, Secret Report 12 in Kingdom Hearts 3, the unknown, being Luxu in this case, after he bequeathed his Keyblade, this is what he stated. I watched as the 5 were sent to another world line at no small cost, ensuring the line of Keyblade wielders will live on. Regardless whether or not Luxu put Ven in one of those lifeboats, he still watched Ven in a way travel to a different world line, he calls it. So yeah, like I said, we have 5 lifeboats left. Remind yourselves that Lauriam and Elrena, aka Larxene, traveled to the future as well. Larxene originates from the timeline in which Lauriam resided in. The 5 in this could just mean 5 people, okay? Arena and the player, for example, were not leaders. So when Luxu said 5, it could have just been 5 people. Alright, option number 1, we have Lauriam, Elrena, Skald, the Master of Masters, yes, bear with me here, I'll get to that later. And number 5, player. This is assuming Ven is the mystery character number 6, and then 7 we have Maleficent, of course. Option 2, Lauriam, Elrena, Skald, Ventus, and the Master of Masters again. This is assuming Ven is not the mystery character. We could assume it's Ava or someone entirely different. Now looking at these 2 options, I'm leaning towards number 2 the most, for 2 reasons. Number 1, mystery character sent out by Luxu could very well be Ava, so we place Ven in the list. Reason number 2, Ephemer, we saw his light in Kingdom Hearts 3, as if he remained behind along with Brain and died. Brain remained behind, most likely to help turn Daybreak Town in Scala. Didn't the Master's Defender turn Land of Departure into Castle Oblivion? It has that capability. The same perhaps happened to Daybreak Town, albeit with some extra help, perhaps Ephemer in this case. Brain played a role in turning Daybreak Town, once it falls to the darkness, into Scala at Kylum. And eventually, Brain turns out to be Ericus' grandfather, looking at this scene from Dark Road. Ericus, after all, is a blue blood, according to a report written by Xehanort in Kingdom Hearts 3. As for Skald, I truly believe she's Subject X. In the character files, which by the way is coming to North America, that'd be the first time we get Japanese exclusive Kingdom Hearts Bibles, call it, coming to North America. That's awesome. In the character files, it is mentioned that Subject X has black hair. So I'm just gonna stick to Skald being one of the people who's gonna use the lifeboat. So with that right there, I assume Skald's gonna use a lifeboat. As for player, I mean, I didn't really go with option 1, but I'll just say it. We don't know who it is yet, or what happened to them. Player could have died in the past, or player somehow made it to the present, but we just don't know who it is yet. All we know right now is that Xehanort, during his youth, has dreamt of player. Think about it. If you use the lifeboat, which I'll get to again later, you lose your body. Only your heart is left. You need a medium and someone to remember you to reform yourself in the present, or whichever timeline you travel to. So think about it. If young Xehanort is dreaming about the player, perhaps that's what caused Ventus to reform himself while traveling with a lifeboat. Although Xehanort doesn't know who Ventus is exactly, because he appeared in his dreams, that acted as the memories part in the equation. You need memories and a medium to fully reform yourself once you travel with a lifeboat, which I'll get to now. You know, the whole memories and medium thing. We're now looking at the final scene. For the last scene of the story update, we have a flashback with the Master of Masters and Darkness. How these two pretty much have crossed paths before. The Master explains what happens to this world afterwards, how Keyblade wielders come together, as numbers dwindle, they try to fight on their own, then more pressure gets put on them as they have to deal with darkness, and once the world succumbs to it. If they use all 7 lifeboats, the world will fall to darkness and be reborn. Darkness wonders why the Master came to this world, wondering if he came here just to see it all fall. The Master tells Darkness that the Book of Prophecies actually doesn't tell everything. Darkness wonders why the Master of Masters is all worked up, when everything is written down in the book. I mean, if the book had such great importance, having everything written down, the Master no way would have let him peek through it. This scene at least takes place after his Keyblade was given to Luxu. Here's the interesting part. The Master, the point I was talking about previously, the whole medium and memories thing, he seems more focused on how to travel to certain locations written in the book. When a lifeboat is used, you lose your body. Only your heart remains. You need 2 things to fully return to your old self. A medium to rebuild their body and memories. In Maleficent's case, either her crow or her robe was the medium. The fairies were the memories. That's how she came back. For the Master of Masters to travel forward in time, he has his eye as his medium and Luxu for the memories part. This scene confirms that the Master travels forward in time using a lifeboat. I mean, how else is he gonna travel forward in time unless he uses vessels? Which is not the case for the Master, that's more of Luxu's thing. We do know that the Master of Masters travels forward in time, to a point where he meets young Xehanort at the start of Remind. So now do you understand what I meant by young Xehanort in Dark Road dreaming up the player, who perhaps he'll eventually see Ventus? That's what allowed Ventus to reform. Unless someone else took the role of memories. However, like seeing Marluxia, they traveled to the timeline which we're used to, but they never remembered who they were, so how would they remember Ventus? What I'm saying here is, they can't play the role of remembering Ventus. The same goes for, Lauriam and Larxene or Elrena. Who remembered them? How did they reform themselves once they traveled using a lifeboat? Well, it's not a Kingdom Hearts game without questions. So going back to the number of lifeboats. Before Luxu used the lifeboat for this mystery character, there were 6 in total. This scene with the Master implies that he's gonna use a pod eventually, unless there's a secret 8th pod somewhere. So already we have the Master of Masters, Maleficent, and this mystery character, that's 3, so we have 4 pods left. Darkness then says 7 pods, and the 7 crowns. Yeah, we have a new term in Kingdom Hearts. Crowns. Unless it's a different way of saying 7 lights. After all, the Master does say 7 lights straight afterwards. Some might start to believe that the 7 crowns thing has to do with Sora because he has a crown necklace. The people connected to him. But stuff like this, I ask myself, let's just wait it out and see what happens. But then you might ask, but those 7 lights never became 7 lights, looking at Lauriam or Elrena. Well, the Master could be referring to a much later timeline. So basically, it ain't a Kingdom Hearts game without more questions. The Master saw something interesting in the future. A world he can't even conceive. Quadratum? KH3's secret ending, we do see the Master on top of a building. That's him alright. So the world he's referring to, I'd like to believe it's Quadratum. A world of fiction. In other words, a world of unreality. These are terms coming from Melody of Memory if you've watched the cutscenes at least. So, with that being said, I think I've said plenty. This new story update of Union Cross was pretty heavy, I'd say. Trying to connect the dots a bit and stuff. So yeah, as usual, if you have questions, your own theories, don't be shy, leave it all in the comments section below. And as always, I've been Vivi, and thank you so much for watching.